Welcome to the Insights to Communicate podcast with Adam Probalski, where market and opinion research come together with public affairs and PR.
All right, welcome to the podcast, Allegra Mangione, who heads up a consulting firm based in Colorado called Catharsis, focusing on marketing for small to medium-sized nonprofits. Welcome. Excited to have you, Allegra.
Hi, Adam. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So I think I gave a little bit of intro there, but I think everybody would love to know your journey. How did you get to this place where you're running your own consulting firm, which is kind of an envious place to be? Did you have some long career working for other people, or did you just dive in out of school? How did you get here?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey really started when I was in school. I had the privilege to take some classes on nonprofit strategy and nonprofit strategic communications. And the idea of consulting, that seed was planted when I was still in my undergrad. But at that point, I was really interested on the way funding worked in the nonprofit sector. And I really wanted to make changes in the way that funders operate, to make nonprofits, to remove barriers for nonprofits to really achieve their mission and do that from a standpoint of listening to their community versus being driven by their funders. And so that was kind of my intention going into my career. And so I was really interested in being on one side of the funding equation, either in a grants and development role at a nonprofit organization or a program officer role in a foundation. And so I landed at a local Denver-based nonprofit, a medium-sized organization by those standards. Maybe there were 50 to 60 employees, $5 million budget. And they had been around for 25 years, and they hired me as a development and communications specialist, I think, kind of just that entry-level role. And had never had a marketing person on the team. So when I came in kind of really being like, I really want to explore our relationships with our funders, the feedback I got from the team was, we're so excited to have a marketing person. We've literally never had one before. And I had not studied marketing or comms in undergrad. I was in my first job out of college and really pivoted and realized that the way I could best support the organization was to build my skill set in marketing and become a really effective marketer. And so that's what I did. And I stayed with that organization for a couple of years and got really amazing firsthand experience leading projects that, to be frank, I was super underqualified to be leading. I led a whole website redesign process during that time. I was working on a marketing strategy for them, rehauled their social media strategy, did graphic design, which I was learning on the fly, and really enjoyed that work on top of writing grants, meeting with funders, development campaigns, all of those pieces. And so, as you can imagine, it was a lot of work. It was too much work for one person. And so I started kind of looking for other opportunities. And this was around the time the pandemic hit. So I'm a few years into my career. I've done a lot of work with professional development in the marketing space. I have a really good sense of what it means to build an effective marketing department in a nonprofit. And the pandemic hits, and I start a part-time job at a local consulting firm here in Denver. Again, fundraising consulting. So I was working on fundraising and strategic planning consulting there, and needed to look for other work. And there's an amazing community of consultants here in Denver. I had a couple connections of folks who did PR consulting, folks who did website design from my previous job. So I tapped into those connections, grant writers, and started to listen and learn about how they started their firm, started their business. And it just became something that, I think I could do this. I think I could niche into marketing strategy for small nonprofits. I have the skill set. I have the network. I'm just going to go for it. And so I spent about a year and a half in transition, working part-time for another consulting firm, and then taking on contracts myself. And then after a year and a half, I launched the brand Catharsis. I really honed in on what our services are going to be, which is a marketing strategic plan, a messaging strategy, and then kind of a Catharsis as your marketing team, fractional marketing support. And launched full time in summer of 2021. And so I'm about 2.5 years into running this firm full time. I have two amazing contractors who work with me as colleagues and thought partners, and they bring their expertise to our client work as well. And I have a full client load of amazing clients, many of whom are Colorado based and a few of whom are based nationally.
That sounds incredible. So I'm super interested in that moment where you're put into the fire almost, and you've got to kind of learn how marketing works. What did you do? Did you YouTube things? Did you just take some classes? Did you call a network of friends and say, okay, how do you write a press release? How do you write a marketing plan? How did you go about figuring that stuff out?
Yeah. So luckily, the organization I was working for did really believe in professional development. And so I had some professional development dollars available to me. I think it was a couple thousand for the year. And I went to my supervisor. I said, look, this job has a lot more marketing than you originally described and you originally hired me for. I'm interested in this. And here are some opportunities I identified. And one of the most valuable ones that I did is I did go to the Colorado Nonprofits Association conference that year. And I just stacked my entire, every session I attended was about marketing or comms. And there's I'll give a shout out to Mission Minded. They're a local Colorado based agency. And they ran a session on creating a marketing strategy that I thought really reframed marketing for me. It talked about centering your audiences and how do you start with audience. It talked about thinking through goals first, and then thinking about platforms where I was sitting in my entry level nonprofit job. What I was getting from management, from my boss was, hey, we need to get our social media presence up. We need to have a newsletter. No, how can we start with who are we trying to engage and where can we reach them? So that was a really valuable training. And then in terms of technical skill sets, I think I was really lucky to be working with contractors who saw my potential and wanted to work with me. So our website agency that we worked with taught me a lot about WordPress that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And our PR agency, she helped me with the fundamentals of PR. So I had a lot of mentorship too, just built within my role, which was very special. And then, there was definitely some Googling, getting on YouTube, just saying how do you create an email marketing strategy? How do you do an email journey? So stuff like that. It was a little bit of everything, but I would really say advocating for organizations to dedicate dollars to professional development for young professionals or any professionals at any stage who are excited about diving into a new skill.
So that kind of nicely transitions to using research in the process of developing marketing strategy and messaging. That's what we do for a living, so I'm always excited to talk about that. But can you talk about how you've used surveys, focus groups, formal, informal, to inform what's next?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny, Adam, because when I originally put together my marketing planning survey, research was not a part of it. And after about 6 months to a year, I realized that it had to be. So that's one of the reasons why I was excited to chat about this topic and why I was passionate about it. So the first step, I think, to putting together a marketing plan in my process, and I would argue any process, this should be the first step, is to really understand your audience. And so I think I'm agnostic into the way to do that. Oftentimes, clients are resistant to taking a several-month process to do a whole research process. So what I try to do is condense it into a more informal process that gives us the value we need to start. And then sometimes within the marketing plan, we put, 6 months down the line, we're going to dive into research a little bit more intensively as well. So what I like to do is do audience interviews. So I sit with the client and we identify who are our audience groups. And in nonprofit organizations, we usually can identify 3 to 4 really distinct groups with distinct needs. Usually there's some sort of constituent population or community that they are working with and serving. There's a donor base, and sometimes they are also selling a product if they have a revenue generating line. So there's sometimes a customer base. Sometimes volunteers emerge as their own unique category. So we really think through what are the different audience groups we're looking to engage with our communications. And then we identify a few names in each of those categories of folks that I can get on the phone with and have a 30-minute conversation with. And I always encourage the client to attend at least a couple to get a sense, because what I find is oftentimes the organization I'm working for says something like, people don't know who we are. We got to get our word out. We generally want everyone to know who our organization is. And I'm really working on having that mindset shift and reorient to, I am serving a community, I'm serving my donors, and I need to understand what value I can deliver to them as an organization and how to best communicate them. So we put together a 30-minute interview. Usually there's some questions that are focused and facing marketing strategy and some questions focused on messaging specifically. And then from there, I'll do between 8 and 12 of those interviews to kickstart the process, do just a qualitative data analysis. It's nothing fancy, and just taking a look at what trends emerge, and then have a few kind of core guiding trends that then inform the rest of the marketing planning process.
That makes a lot of sense. I love how that works. So you've got a lot of experience with nonprofits, but your focus is on marketing. Does it ever happen where something program-wise comes up, where people are looking for programs, and then you're going back to the client and saying, hey, I really think you should have this program? Does that bleed over at all? And is that an uncomfortable situation ever?
Yes, it does. Like sometimes the interviewee will say something like they have feedback for their experience with the program staff, or something like that. And so how I handle that is, one, just preventatively trying to be really clear about the scope of the interview and what the interview will be used for up front. So always just saying, hey, I'm coming in as a marketing consultant, and we're working on building a marketing plan for this organization. So we're hoping to hear from you about how the organization's communicated with you in the past, how you'd like to be communicated with, and then ask if they have any clarifying questions to start off the interview. And normally I'd say like that 90% of the time they have a clear sense of what this is for. I'd say the case where normally it steers away from marketing is when I'm talking to specific clients of the organization. Like, for example, I work with an amazing nonprofit that matches older adults who own homes with folks who are housing insecure.
Wow.
And makes those matches so that the housing insecure folks have lower rent, and the older adults have companionship, someone to be there in case of an emergency, stuff like that. Great concept, right?
Yeah.
And so I did about 12 interviews with folks in that program. And so those folks in particular really wanted to talk about their experience with the staff, their experience with their roommate. And so those ones are a little trickier to navigate. And so my strategy is always to listen, validate, and then try to redirect if we're off task. But if I do ever get feedback about a bad experience or even a good experience, I make sure to I have a section in my report that's like, other feedback that doesn't have to do with marketing. And I'll always share that with my client, with the organization I'm working with, so that they can make use of that in the way that works for them as well.
Very cool. Okay, let's go to tech stack. I'm always fascinated by how people kind of organize their business and organize their operation and how they communicate with their team and communicate with their clients. So what's your big, things that you use on a daily basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am all on Google. So I have my Gmail account. I Google everything is in Google Docs. I find that to be the easiest way to share documents with the clients. I always check in with the client if they want to share docs in another way. And I've never had one that didn't want to use Google Drive. So
Right.
That is good. For Catharsis websites, I am not I can design a website, but I am not a website developer. So I stayed with Wix. Squarespace is also a similar option.
Yeah.
And do hosting through Wix. And I find that to be low cost, flexible, works for what I need. And then in terms of business development, I love HubSpot as a CRM. It's a free CRM. It really works for developing a pipeline and going through a business development process with clients, and then all the follow-up tasks are in there as well. So that I use it for meeting scheduling. All of that is within HubSpot. And then in terms of project management, interestingly, I don't have a project management software that I use. I am very much like a still scribbling in notebooks type of person. But I think I've always thought if my team is going to grow, that would be something I would invest in. We're just at 3 people. We don't really need it yet. And then I will say my team has been doing a lot of experimenting with different AI tools in the past year. We used ChatGPT for some pieces. We really like Canva's AI tools. You do a lot of stuff in Canva. And then some other unique ones for building presentations or video segmenting and captioning and clipping, some for generating translated captions, stuff like that. So we have started to foray into AI and we did a webinar on AI in November and are always happy to talk about AI for nonprofit marketing specifically.
I love that. Super helpful to kind of understand how that all works. I've done a little bit of digging and spent a little time on your website, and it's kind of an interesting thing you've got that is different than almost any other consultant I've encountered. And that is you have your prices listed on your website.
I do.
And, obviously there's a high level of transparency there. I suspect that there's probably people that see that, identify that you're not an option for them because you're too expensive, although none of the prices seem very high to me. But that may make your life easier because you eliminate those people from kind of reaching out. So it seems like it could probably work out pretty well. But talk to me about the philosophy behind putting your pricing on there, because I don't think anybody else does that.
I know it is a question I get sometimes, and it is a philosophy and a values piece. And one is that my values are pretty explicitly on my website too, and you will see one of those is transparency. And so I really do try to operationalize my values in every facet of my business that I can. And so one of them is pricing transparency. Another piece of it, though, is really thinking about centering your audience. And so while it might be more convenient for me to keep prices so that I can adjust them based on budgets and that type of thing. If I'm a nonprofit and I'm going to a consultant's website, what is my first question? It is, how much is this going to cost me? And so I want to deliver, similar to how I encourage my clients to deliver the information their audience members are looking for. I want to do the same for my business as well. And I think having that foundation of convenience and transparency, when I do then get on a phone with a potential client, have a conversation, there's already a base level of trust built. And I will always, I'll talk through their situation and kind of recommend a package. And I'll tell them in that call, I'll tell them a range, you've seen my prices on my website, this package I'm putting together for you, this is going to be the range. I need some time to put together the proposal to give you an exact number. And that way I'm not wasting my time, putting together a proposal that they're not going to be able to afford. Another piece of what I do is I'll always give them a few options, a few tiers within that proposal. So this is the highest recommended, the maximum engagement, and this is how much it would cost. But also, if that's not going to work for your budget, here are some ways we could cut back on the scope of work and still get a lot of value, but that would be more affordable for you. So not only am I transparent my pricing on my website for anyone to see, once the client and I are having the conversation, I try to be really transparent so they know what they're paying for. And I think that just pays dividends down the road. I've never had an issue with a client not paying me or disputing an invoice or anything like that. So just really making sure that we're all on the same page from the get-go is important to me.
It's kind of refreshing for sure. And, I always say there's no secret sauce in what we do. Even though there's data analytics, there's science and math behind some of what we do, there's no particular secret sauce. We're not going to pretend like there's something we're doing, inside of a black box. It's we can show you everything. So I kind of like the idea of that, generally saying, showing the world, hey, this is what we do. This is what we cost. Let's work together if you want to, but you don't have to. I think it's a very cool way of presenting yourself.
Yeah, thanks. It also, or I'll just add to, it helps on the back end too, because then I'm not having to think through my pricing every time. I know what I'm going to price specific things, and so it saves me time as well.
Right. Unsolicited advice, raise your rates. I mean, they don't seem that high to me. So let's go to words to live by, your mantra, what you tell everybody or runs through your head that drives you. What are those things, those words, those concepts that are super important to drive you?
Well, my kind of driving motivator and force is just like, I know how hard it is to be in a marketer's seat at a nonprofit organization. And so I really see it as my role to support, to guide, to make your job easier. Like, I think, being in the nonprofit sector is hard. Working for an organization, you're often have taken a lower salary because you believe in the mission of the organization. There's often fewer resources in terms of support as an employee. And so I really am personally connected to the work because I have been there and really want to be that support that I wish I had had. And so that's something that is always my intention. And so I come to this work as a human and have kind of the human pieces of the work in the forefront. So that means, and you'll be able to kind of tell, I studied human services in college. I thought I was going to become a social worker. So I've taken counseling and I use it. Probably that's the most useful class I took in college because I use it every day with my clients. Is just listening, getting to the root of what they're actually feeling and what the problem actually is versus whatever is on the surface. And really leading with empathy, helping people feel understood, because ultimately that makes it easier to then suggest a solution that I might have been met with some resistance when if it's wildly different, if it feels intimidating or expensive or time intensive. If I'm really showing people that I understand where they're at and then come with solutions, I think the work can be more effective and we can all enjoy it more too. So that's something that really guides my consulting practice and every facet of the work I do.
Sounds great. I really appreciate you being on the podcast, Allegra. Thanks so much. And we'll look forward to keep the conversation going.
Thanks for having me, Adam. It was a joy. And I'm excited to continue to see your episodes as you come out. They've been pretty cool so far, the ones I've listened to.
Thank you.
This has been Insights to Communicate with Adam Probalski, president of the woman and Latina-owned market and opinion research firm, Probalski Research.